Дорогие участники, я рад вас приветствовать на очередном семинаре «Цифровая среда Сибирского федерального университета». И сегодня мы рады участию в нашем семинаре Куинн Домбровски, которая представит доклад Directories as Utopian Infrastructure, каталоги как утопическая инфраструктура, где будут рассмотрены современные подходы к каталогизации ресурсов цифровых гуманитарных наук и не только. Куинн Домбровски, специалист по академическим технологиям в отделе литературы, культуры и языков, а также в библиотеке Стэнфордского университета и автор таких статей, как The Directory Paradox и Absorbing Dirt to Directories in the Digital Age. And so we are now switching to English. Quinn, very welcome you here at our digital Sreda in Russian, as well as Wednesday, as well as environment. So it's up to you what to choose, whether we are in digital environment or in digital Wednesday. And thank you very much that this early Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. local time, you are with us. And in English, we also need to present Kуинн Домбровски, academic technology specialist in literatures, cultures, and languages at Center for Interdisciplinary Digital Research. Kуинн has BA and MA in Slavic linguistics from the University of Chicago and Master in Library and Information Science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So the screen is yours. Thank you very much for joining us, Kуинн.
Thank you for the introduction. И извините за этот доклад на английском языке сегодня. Если бы я рассказала об этом себе 16-летнему, мне было бы очень стыдно. В средней школе каждое утро я вставала очень рано, чтобы изучать русский язык. Русский язык был тем, что моя мачеха не могла у меня отнять. Я участвовала в международной олимпиаде по русскому языку в 2001 году, и в университете Чикаго я написала магистерскую диссертацию о новгородских берестяных грамотах. На моем обручальном кольце написан отрывок из берестяной грамоты, и мой муж тоже изучал русский язык в школе. Когда мы познакомились в интернете, перед тем, как мы поступили в университет Чикаго, мы писали друг другу только по-русски. В 2007 году я работала переводчиком Виктора Баранова на международной конференции DH. Но время идет, я родила 3 детей, работала в разных ролях, где русский язык стал ненужным. И сейчас говорить по-русски гораздо сложнее. И поэтому прошу прощения. Продолжаю на английском. Project Bamboo in the early 2000s was this utopian idea where IT people working at the University of Chicago and UC Berkeley saw the emergence of digital humanities and realized that there would be some problems if things continued the way they had started. There were a lot of scholars who were developing projects that they could work for small communities of people, groups of 10 or 20 or 30, projects that still exist, some of them, like Perseus, for instance. But the IT people worried what would happen if things got very big, if digital humanities really took off, if these developers were looking at 5,000 users at a time instead of 50. And so with some support from the Mellon Foundation, they got people together from mostly the US, and there was a meeting in Paris to talk about what scholarly practice was and what it could be in the future, and how we could build cyber infrastructure to improve it. But even before Project Bamboo, there was this thread of the Directory, where at the 2005 Summit on Digital Tools for the Humanities, one of the takeaway points was that the most valuable aid for collaboration would be a clearinghouse to inform and educate digital scholars about useful tools. And I think in a certain sense, by extension, the projects that use those tools. If we look at the landscape of things that were in existence at the time that Project Bamboo was being created, things that sort of provided alternative models to this cyber infrastructure focused vision that Project Bamboo had. We find the Dirt Directory, Plant Seeds, Grow Ideas, that Lisa Spiro first created. And it was a free wiki platform. There were different people who were helping out, at least in theory, to curate these different sections. And one of the major things that Dirt did was reframe the classification of tools, not into their general functions, but concretely what people wanted to do with them. And you can see this at the bottom. I want to analyze statistics. I want to analyze text, things like that. There were also linguistic tools. There were tools for telling stories. And each of these was a simple wiki page. You had a link to the tool, a short description of it, and then in parentheses, some things about the cost and the platform the tool was available on. At the same time, around 2008, there were other tool directories as well. There was something called the Toy Chest that Alan Liu had put together. There was the Tool Center out of, I believe, George Mason University. And there was Arts Humanities Net, which was a big project at King's College London, funded by JISC. And if we take a quick leap forward in time, both artshumanities.net and the Tool Center were gone and off the internet, honestly, by 2012 or 2013. To this day, Alan Liu's Toy Chest does still exist, but notably, he's brought the scope in from tools for humanists to do things digitally, to focus really on the classes that he's teaching. And the tool directory has been reimagined to kind of directly serve a smaller group of people, and his vision for what they need to be doing in the context of his class. So Project Bamboo had this cyber infrastructure focus. The community had other ideas though. While Project Bamboo was thinking of building a technical platform to help people scale out web services, enable access and discovery to texts, connecting texts with tools, the people in the workshops had ideas about the need to find collaborators, the need to learn what tools are out there, and sort of what projects are out there and how they could connect to people. You can see on the right here, at one point, I mapped kind of the major threads and ideas of what Project Bamboo could be and do. We had talked about, partnering with Lisa Spiro on the Dirt Directory in the early phase of the project. There was talk about, activism, political activism around supporting the humanities and getting more funding for universities, as well as within the universities, thinking about how to change tenure and review guidelines to better support digital work. And each of those different kinds of threads is a different color here. Unfortunately, what we ended up with in the technical proposal that Bamboo was actually supposed to create in the end was more or less the same things that Bamboo started with. It was very tech oriented, and a lot of the human directed resources that people wanted were not in it. So I was young in the 2000s, and I had time on my hands. I had nights and weekends that stretched out to infinity, it feels like in retrospect. And as someone working on the Project Bamboo staff, I was frustrated at the fact that these human-oriented pieces of work were not going to be part of the final proposal. So I decided to just do them. And talking with Ryan Cordell at a That Camp event in Chicago, we realized that there was a need for a directory of projects and for people to be able to find each other and find collaborators on projects. There were many people who were new to DH and wanted to volunteer, but the question was, where do they volunteer and how do they get in touch with people that they could work with? So we created DH Commons, which was an initiative of CenterNet shortly after we created it, kind of as the idea of this virtual DH center where people could post descriptions of their projects and people could post descriptions of their skills, and they could be connected and meet each other. Then as time went on and Lisa Spiro took on different roles and was no longer able to maintain the Dirt Directory, which you will see is a common thread in here, the bamboo project decided to take it on. We realized that there was a challenge that we faced, which was in terms of publicity, where no one knew what bamboo was or what it was supposed to be doing. And we thought that sort of taking on a little bit of a side project to adopt the directory and rebrand it as something that Bamboo was doing and offering to the community might actually help us sort of with our public image and kind of give people something that they could connect to within the Bamboo project. So this brought together not only the original Dirt Wiki data, but also data about tools from artshumanities.net. Artshumanities.net was meant to be a fairly comprehensive project that not only was a directory of tools, it was also a directory of projects, a directory of jobs, a directory of events, and various other things within the ecosystem, any one of which would be difficult to maintain. Maintaining all of them at once was even more difficult. So technically, with a new Bamboo Dirt, we kind of restructured the whole thing. So rather than having single wiki pages where with some of the listings you had to scroll quite a bit to get to the tool that you're looking for, we set it up so that each tool had its own profile and it had its own web page that you could link to directly. And then you could sort and filter by these different parameters, including platform, cost, and things like that. We were seeking sustainability. This was a common theme of directories that we were building at the time, and also Project Bamboo itself. We realized that this is something that could not happen as a standalone entity, but needed to be sort of knitted into the digital humanities community of the time, with the thought that if there are more people using it and more people invested in it, surely they will all contribute labor to be able to make this continue to happen. While we realized that, as I mentioned, the artshumanities.net model of having everything under a single project was not feasible, we thought to ourselves, what would it look like if we were to integrate sites that are managed differently under the auspices of different organizations? We had Bamboo Dirt under Project Bamboo and DH Commons as an initiative of CenterNet. What if we had them talking to each other? What if we made it possible to link to a Dirt tool from DH Commons, and on Dirt see the projects that use that tool as part of that tool's profile? We also worked on an integration with the CUNY Academic Commons that eventually evolved to become Humanities Commons today, where you could add tools that you use to your profile on the Academic Commons, and then those links would link back to Dirt, so people could be sort of connected to Dirt and accessing information in Dirt as part of their academic profile. We had to break up with Project Bamboo, not least because it was defunded. Very awkwardly, Project Bamboo staff worked on a proposal for a second phase of technical development for probably an entire year of proposal writing and revisions and iterations. And at the very last minute before this was sent to the Mellon board for approval, we received an email almost 10 years ago, actually, 10 years ago next month, that they were not going to be moving forward with Project Bamboo. This was a bit awkward for me, particularly as I had just moved from Chicago to Berkeley to work on Project Bamboo. But it was decided that Project Bamboo was not going to happen after all, and it was over. So for details about what happened with Project Bamboo, there's an article I wrote in Literary and Linguistic Computing, I guess now Digital Studies in the Humanities, that goes into some of the issues of the approach of building Project Bamboo, the partnerships, and how those relationships and ways of working can go awry. But it wasn't the end of Dirt. The interesting thing was, in the message that we got from Mellon, while they were not interested in funding more Project Bamboo, they were interested in funding Dirt. And so that made possible this partnership between DH Commons, Commons in a Box, and the CUNY Academic Commons to develop these technical integrations between the sites. So we rebranded DIRT without the bamboo. While we had built it, to be a bit of a promotional vehicle for Project Bamboo, once that was no longer in the picture, we had a little bit more freedom to make it its own resource. So you can see there Lisa Spiro with the new set of DIRT stickers that we put together. And DIRT conveniently, through the Mellon funding of this ongoing project, became a major part of my job for a few years when I was at UC Berkeley. And I was able to imagine doing the directory right. I had seen the warning signs of other directories, including artshumanities.net, which was not a small project. I had seen the warning signs of how those projects can fall apart. But I, again, young, naive, and optimistic, believed that we could do this better, and I was determined to do so. So we sort of further partnered with CenterNet, hope to be able to, bring in together more resources from the centers, having people contribute tools to the directory, and things like that. And we also were one of the founding partners of TDIRA, the Taxonomy of Digital Research Activities in the Humanities. Shortly after my now oldest child was born, I would get up for these 6 a.m. meetings where we would discuss what categories we had on the DIRT directory for tools. And then we would also talk about what categories they had on the German DH Association's blog and sort of collection of articles about DH. And together we came up with this taxonomy that had, research activities and methods, and thought about how we could align our different ways of looking at the world into a taxonomy that could be used in a wide variety of contexts. And ironically, of all of these projects, TDIRA is the one that is doing the best. It continues to live and thrive as part of DARIA, which is very gratifying to see. So we built this integration with DH Commons, and we're able to successfully pull in the tools that projects would use if people entered that metadata. You can see on the left-hand side here, in the sidebar, it says tools used in Drupal. And if you clicked on that, that would take you over to DIRT. You could also see all the other projects that use Drupal, so that if you, like me at the time, were skilled in using Drupal, you could find a project where you could volunteer or get involved in some other ways. Here's another example of a listing of projects based on the platform that they use. These were a few different projects at the time that were using Drupal that had created project profiles on DH Commons. We went even further. There was a Spanish translation of the DIRT site, partnering with Jimena del Rio Riande in Argentina. And she went through and translated the information about many of the tools. She had a variety of collaborators who helped support that. This led to the translation of the TDIRA vocabulary as well into Spanish in the beginning of, again, sort of a robust multilingual effort that continues to this day in different spaces. We also developed tool reviews and an assignment in a box. So as DIRT grew, we realized that, part of the challenge was that I couldn't run it forever kind of as the sole, directory dictator. We wanted to have a group of people contribute to it and feel invested in it. And we ended up putting out a call for kind of editors and leads for different sections on the DIRT directory, which worked in the sense of bringing in more people. And some of those people were already in library roles where they were gathering information about tools, and they were happy to have a place to put that information where it would be useful to not only the people at their institution, but to people all over the world. And some of the folks that came into those roles had other ideas that were exciting and interesting, such as tool reviews. where, they or other people they knew, the idea was they could write reviews of tools, how they used it, how well it worked, and that could be a section on the tool's profile. The idea was not just to give people more context about the tools, but also for people who had developed tools within the digital humanities community. Those tool reviews could be a way for them to get credit, get recognition, thinking similar to a book review or a project review, but a little bit more nimble. And that struck me as a great idea, and the sort of thing that would be a good thing to have in a directory. And so I said, yes, let's go do that. And then another facet of this was the assignment in a box concept, where, for people who are teaching digital humanities, wouldn't it be great if you could sort of explore different tools in a tool directory, and get a pointer to an assignment that someone else had put together for learning how to use that tool or how to apply it to a certain discipline or context. This could be an invaluable resource for helping people reduce the amount of time they have to spend prepping different digital humanities classes, or possibly lower the barrier to entry for people to add a digital humanities component to a disciplinary class. And once again, these seem like great ideas, utopian even, that you could find a place that not only had all the tools that people are using, but also these reviews and these assignments to make it easier to use. And again, being young and enthusiastic, I said, yes, absolutely, let's do that. There was also the idea of recipes. This is something that we had seen in as part of the Project Bamboo planning grant with Jeffrey Rockwell. He had put together the idea of kind of recipes or workflows that documented how you could chain tools together to accomplish some kind of scholarly aim. The idea being that for most academic workflows, you can't just use one tool and be done. There's sometimes, one tool you use to gather your data, another tool you use to clean the data, another tool you use to analyze the data, and maybe another tool you use to visualize the data at the end. And what if we actually spelled all of that out in a bit of a recipe that you could use, and that other people could reuse in different contexts? So in talking with Jeffrey Rockwell, as he was interested in building out this methods commons that would have recipes using tools in his tapeboard directory, we thought, great, let's do that as well, and we can connect to the methods commons to show also on the tool directory profile what recipes the tool is in. And here's what we ended up doing with the commons in a box integration. Again, the commons in the box eventually evolved into what is now Humanities Commons. But there was a section of the groups where a group could identify the tools that they're working with, as you can see over on the left. And then on the right, as part of the individual profile, people could add tools to their profile. So this could function a little bit like a sort of professional job networking site, where someone could say that they have expertise in this and that tool, perhaps get contract work, things like that. When people join groups, they could get a sense of what the workflow of those groups was. These were all, very good ideas in the sense that they sounded good at the time. And if they had actually worked, they would have served actual needs that people had. And so we thought that we were really onto something here. As I mentioned, we brought in the editorial board. There was a small group of people who were actively involved in adding tools and creating some of this content. But we wanted to sort of bring in a diverse group of voices from as much of the globe as possible, which again sounds like a great idea until you try to start scheduling meetings. And if you're looking at, 15 people from, almost as many time zones, it quickly becomes utterly intractable without someone getting up in the middle of the night. And so, to be completely honest, the editorial board only ever actually had one meeting. despite being inspired by the number of people who signed up saying that they wanted to do this, and we brought them onto the editorial board, and we had the inaugural meeting. That was also the last meeting, because it just proved impossible to find a time that worked for enough people to be worth doing. And even though we sort of gave people assignments after that first meeting to go through different tool listings, clean up broken links, get rid of spam, only a handful of the participants actually did the work that they had signed up to do. But we weren't done with good ideas for Dirt. We enthusiastically embraced all of the suggestions that seemed like good ones, and one of them that now is feeling more antiquated with every day that Twitter melts down is the idea of adding a tool by tweeting. So you could tweet something with a specific hashtag, Dirt tools or something like that, and it would automatically create a stub page on Dirt that you or someone else could later go and fill out and add to the directory. And as you can see here, we started to get spam, and even with the spam, though, there were ultimately not that many people who actually did this. Despite many people saying that yes, they would absolutely do this. This would make it so much easier. They would definitely contribute to Dirt if only they could add a tool by tweeting. In reality, it didn't work out quite that way. But we weren't done with exciting ideas that people said that they would most definitely use and would definitely make them contribute to Dirt. We also created tool lists as part of it, so that any person could create different lists of tools, maybe a list of tools that they would use for a class, a list of tools that were relevant to their disciplinary community, a list of tools that they were just personally interested in or that were associated with their project. So every user could have their own set of tool lists that could then integrate with other sites. We had, at least for a while, a partnership going with the Geospatial ADHO Special Interest Group, where they had their own directory of tools, and that was pulling data from Dirt. And this was exactly the sort of connections that I hoped that we would be able to create with the Dirt directory. Rather than everyone creating tool directories over and over again, what if we all pooled our efforts and worked together on a single site that we could then reuse and repurpose in different contexts? But we weren't done yet. Still, export options and an API. We added a CSV download because people said that they would love to have the ability to download different sets of tools, both lists and categories available as CSVs. We also added RSS feeds for everything, so you could follow when people added new tools in a specific category. We had a Sparkle endpoint for a little while. There was an API that we did some documentation on. So there were many ways that people could interact with Dirt data. And, we once again were optimistic that by embedding it in all of these places and providing all these different ways of accessing tools and adding tools and working with tools, and a place for people to put reviews and to put their assignments in a way that would be shareable, and other people could use it, this would be a valuable thing for people in the community. And that's what everyone told us. Everyone said, absolutely, we would use this. We want this. We want this directory. We want all these features. And we did it. So many of these slides here I found in a slide deck from March 2015, which was, I guess that was the last time that I had edited it. But this was even earlier, I think, that I had been working on it. This was maybe like 2013 or 2014 that I was doing most of this work. And in this presentation that I gave in 2015 about it, these were the lessons learned that I gave at the time. The need to balance the sort of dictator versus committee organization models. It's a lot easier and faster if you simply have one person in charge who can make the decisions. But I did believe and still do believe that it's important to bring in more of the community if this is going to be a community resource. Incentivizing boring work and involving people who do it already. Directories are tedious and they involve a lot of labor, and the labor doesn't stop. You have to constantly be adding new tools, editing existing tool profiles because URLs change, information changes. And if you have it open to the world for more people to edit, realistically, you won't get very many people editing, but you will get spam. And so you need to clean that up as well. The wrong technical decision is sometimes the right one. This was a reference to the fact that my central IT colleagues at Berkeley were not exactly impressed by my choice of Drupal as the platform for this tool. They had a much more complex kind of custom code system in mind for the original plans for Project Bamboo's equivalent of Dirt. But the fact was that, I could build Drupal sites. I could build Drupal sites overnight. And I could run Drupal sites, at least assuming I had time and energy and motivation to do it. So yeah, the wrong technical decision in the sense of, considering the entire world of possibilities and what might be the ideal one. Sometimes choosing a non-ideal one is right for getting the project off the ground. And finally, a name and good reputation are among a project's most valuable assets. People still talk about Dirt fondly to this day, even though it's been gone for quite some time. And Bamboo had hoped to sort of play off of that as well to revamp its own image. Of course, that's not how it ended. So those were the lessons that I learned in 2015. But really, I think I was in denial about the fact at that point that there was a bigger problem, which is, as Paige Morgan so succinctly put it about digital humanities projects, labor is never not an issue. So digital humanities directories are like cake. I realized yesterday as I was putting these slides together. People get excited about cake. People love cake. Cake is a special occasion, and if you ask most people, would they like a really great cake, they will absolutely say, yes, I am there. I will eat the cake. I will be excited about the cake. Like, what we need is more cake. Cake everywhere. Cake is fantastic. But in reality, cake is exciting on special occasions. Cake is delicious and fun and gives you a good sugar high. But in order to keep the cake fresh, someone has to be maintaining the cake and making new cakes and updating the cakes. Someone is stuck eating the cake over and over for year after year after year. This is my kid, year after year, with cakes, and you get tired of cake. Cake is exhausting, and it gives you a stomachache if you're eating it all the time. But that's the reality of the fact. There is someone who has to maintain these things. Otherwise they go out of date and no one wants them and people move on. And usually while there may be resources available to make the directory to begin with, it is an endless mountain of labor and maintenance work, and there usually isn't funding or support for that. And honestly, there's almost always something more interesting to do than update the directory. I can say from years of experience on this. It reached the point with Dirt, where I basically had to admit defeat, and I emailed the other people who were still, at least on some level, interested and involved in the project, although many of them hadn't done much, if anything, in a while. And basically say, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we have to be done. And perhaps surprising, perhaps not, there was not anyone in that group then who stepped up and said, I will do it. I will eat the cake every day, always ongoing. No one stepped up to run it in a permanent way. And we ended up then giving all of our data over to Tapor, which does still exist, because Jeffrey Rockwell is a faculty member who gets grants, and Tapor sort of gets worked into those grants that he gets, and he's able to maintain it that way by paying grad student research assistants. But in cases where you don't have access to that funding and labor pool, it's worth thinking hard before taking on cake. And also, is cake what you want to be eating anyways? There are many other options, especially now, and different models that one can build on to think about, better accomplishing the things that you want to do with this directory. Like, why are you doing the directory? Is it literally just because you have a list of things that you want to make available somewhere for findability? Are you trying to build community? Are you trying to support connections between projects? What are you trying to do? And are there better ways of doing that than making a directory that has to be maintained in a current form? And really, there are better models now. Reviews in DH, for instance, offers peer review of digital scholarship, has been going on for nearly 3 years now. And it's not just projects, it's projects and also tools that they've reviewed. And by reviewing tools and projects on a monthly basis, every month they have a new issue. Some of them are kind of co-edited with different communities or different groups. Some of them are just general calls. Sometimes they're thematic. But over the course of all of these months, they've gathered together information about quite a wide variety of tools. People submit a write-up of their tool or project, describing what it is, sort of what their academic intervention is, how they built it, and then they get a couple different reviewers from the field to read through it, to look at the site or at the tool, and write up a response to it, and they publish this. And over the course of all of those things that they've reviewed, they now have a register that you can sort A through Z, time period, field of study, or topic or method, where you can find those reviews. Crucially, what you're looking at is the reviews, not the tools themselves. So if the tool goes down, or if the project loses its funding and the website goes away, it's not like you have to do some quick updates on reviews in DH for it to not seem terribly out of date. It's a registry of kind of snapshots in time of these tools, which is a different thing, but also valuable. And the peer review aspect of it is arguably far more valuable than what we were doing with casual reviews or assignments in a box on Dirt. By being a publication, there's a regular publication schedule. They solicit the reviewers, they organize all of this, and it's a way to guarantee that the work gets done in a way that we couldn't do with Dirt, where ultimately we only got a handful of assignments and a handful of reviews, if even that. For something that's closer to Dirt, in terms of kind of a directory-like thing, there's Alex Keel and company's Karidish Skull 2021. It's a sort of digital scholarship directory, but it is time-bound and limited. It is essentially a bibliography of what happened that year in that particular subfield. So there is a window of time each year where submissions are open. Send in your articles, send in your projects, send in your resources in this area. And then it closes, and they publish that year's bibliography. And it's done. It's a static website. It's there as a resource, but there's no presumption of it being updated, because it is from that particular period of time, with the acknowledgement that things will go down and things will break. But it is what it was at that particular moment, and you're not left trying to constantly run up against spam and run up against things that are broken and the need to update them. So yeah, sustainability. I've come to the conclusion that sustainability is lies we tell ourselves, or maybe fairy tales or fantasies. And digital humanities, has been set up structurally so that we are constantly lying to ourselves. With almost every grant, there's this question of what's the long-term sustainability plan of this tool or resource or project? And everyone has to make up a story about what the sustainability plan is. And I'm convinced now that most of this is lies. Like, realistically, the number of scenarios where you'll be able to actually make that sustainability plan happen, where the resources will come together, where the labor will come together. That is fairly unlikely in the grand scheme of things. And what if we focus less on sustainability and more on what we actually can guarantee that we'll get out of it? Because truly the only sustainable thing with these kinds of projects is what you learn along the way. The projects may go away. Dirt is gone. DH Commons is gone. So many of these efforts, mine and others, are gone. But running a directory, or creating a resource like this, or doing any kind of DH project, is often an incredibly good learning experience that can help you build more and better things in the future. I've learned a lot of lessons from cakes over the years. From how to get people excited about a project, how to respond to difficult questions about, when people have very specific needs that they want a general purpose resource to support. I've learned how to think about taxonomies and organizing things. I've learned kind of really how much labor has to go into these sorts of projects for them to be successful. And how do you find a group of people who are willing to take that journey with you? It's all been incredibly useful, and I've been able to apply it in different ways since. Most recently, since March, I've been working with Anna Kias and Sebastian Majstorovic on saving Ukrainian cultural heritage online. And I can sort of see a direct line between Dirt and here, where we've been archiving Ukrainian cultural heritage websites that are at risk of data loss with the goal of digital repatriation after the war. Recently, we've moved on into documenting memes and also trying to get digitization equipment to Ukraine. And were it not for the experience of Dirt and these other directories, it would not be possible to bring together this group of, over 1,300 volunteers across the globe, enlisting everyone from, 5 to 8-year-old children to retirees, to learn about web archiving and help us with this work. And this is a project that, is worth it for me. On one hand, it's like a cake. There's a lot of labor involved, and there's really no end in sight of the work, even after the war, that will need to go into this. But it's satisfying to be able to take cake and turn it into something with a larger impact. So I would say, ask yourselves, is cake what you need right now? And it looks delicious, and you want the answer to be yes, perhaps. But there's a lot more to it when you make a cake. What sort of commitment are you making? To a community, if you sell this as a group resource, to yourself in terms of what you're willing to sacrifice in terms of your nights and weekends and other more interesting parts of your job. So think hard before making a cake. Спасибо большое.
Well, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And the privilege of the first comment and question goes to Inna, who is the discutant of our today's discussion. Inna, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Andrei, and tremendous thanks to Queen for such insightful is not a word that I would like to use here, because it was more than that. It was so sincere, so enthusiastic, so dedicated, as everything that Queen does. Well, what impressed me most was your response back in 2015, 5 years ago, when at the CenterNet meeting in Montreal, you announced that Dirt is not going to continue. And it was so touching, so wonderful, so full of enthusiasm and regret and understanding of how much you contributed and how much you got and how much you wanted it to continue and how much you understand that it should stop. It was really, really fantastic. One of the most wonderful remembrances I have of DH meetings. Well, and this project that was done for the community and with the community is very much about how to get people together, how to connect them, and how to help them learn together with you, and probably even more than you do, and well, how to be involved and how develop everything together. And it is also very, very good. But indeed, I do understand that that such enthusiasm and dedication and sincerity is hardly something that we can require from us ordinary worldly people. Not everybody can contribute in the same way. But when the very experience, the very progress that we make by building directories and learning from them is definitely valuable. And my question in this respect is, can I use this opportunity to ask the first question, Andrei? You were talking about reviews as a better model. And here, as it seems, we turn away from epistemological understanding of the world and classifications and library and information science to perspectival attitudes that are so characteristic of academics, of us people who look at things and think about things and then disseminate our knowledge and understanding about things. But this is something absolutely different from classification schemes that also help us understand the world in a completely different way. How do you think these two differ? And do you really think that these better models are better? This is my question.
Yeah, thank you for both your comment and the question. It's funny. I managed to completely forget about the CenterNet meeting. I think that having to get up there and once again say to everyone, well, this has failed. And for me, much more personally than Project Bamboo failing, I think I managed to completely delete that memory somewhere in there. But no, thank you for reminding me of it. I now that you mention it, I do remember that day. Yeah, with both reviews in DH and the kind of annual bibliography, I mean less to endorse necessarily the kind of review-ness of it, or the classification, sort of listing of the annual bibliography, and more the publication and labor model. It wouldn't have to be a review, and it doesn't have to be categorized. It could be both. It could be something else. It could be kind of reflections on these tools or projects. It could be a blog with write-ups from the creators of these different projects, or perhaps students who have worked on the project. You could have a resource that could be a publication venue for students who are collaborators on these projects to sort of share their reflections, but to structure it in a time-bound way, with sort of established models for getting things done and out the door. Whether it's an annual publication or a monthly publication, and with different ways to group different projects, be it through tags or be it through the example of the directory list that they have on reviews in DH. The content almost doesn't matter here. You could innovate in this way in a lot of different directions, be it descriptions or reflections from students or other people on the project. But whatever, my point is mostly that you need to time bound it, and you need to have a process and someone committed to a process for publishing things, because a great open-ended directory is a terrible burden to put on anyone who is responsible for it, because there's literally no way out. other than shutting the thing down or giving it to some other hapless victim.
So directory is a fate, yeah? Please, questions. Yeah, Kirill, please.
Thank you, Quinn. That was a very, heartbreaking story, your talk, and so much relatable about the youth enthusiasm and so many dead projects we had in 2000s and that time. But my question is more about today's problem and today's situation. I like very much your metaphor of the cake and want to apply it everywhere. And for example, reflecting on the projects in these days now, like it's more or less common idea that directories of tools is a thing of the past that didn't work, and more or less everyone more or less agree on that. But there is a new phenomenon, I believe, that is in some important ways similar to that effort of building directories a couple of decades ago. And that is a collecting data repositories. I'm much myself involved in that. So my question is that a healthy diet, in fact, or just when we're building online, repositories for data? Is data a new chocolate for the age? And we are piling up chocolate. What do you think?
I think as long as you're piling up chocolate and perhaps some other things, like, you're okay. What you don't want is people throwing you their empty chocolate wrappers. If we'll continue to like torture this metaphor a little bit. I mean, I do think that data repositories are better because, it's like an actual collection of things that people could then take and use. It's not a list of pointers to things that may or may not exist, at least in theory. Also, when things go into the repository, they're usually done or some form of done. And so it's a useful way for projects to kind of, send off their assets and the things that they've created and put them in a position where other people can build on them and have extra life. I guess the trick is just, often it's tempting when you're wrapping up a project in a hurry because, it's the end of your funding and there's going to be no more staff or, anything very, very soon, to throw together a group of things that like truly are not repurposable, that no one is going to want to be able to use because you haven't documented it well, because it's missing things, because there were maybe big errors in your like data collection, but you're not very forthcoming about what those errors are, and someone might not realize that until they're already halfway into using it and they realize the whole thing is useless. I think the trick is to make sure that what's in there has ideally been like prepared responsibly, and is actually something that someone might want to use, instead of chucking one of a pair of shoes and like, maybe a dirty sock over into the repository. A pile of chocolate, though, I think has great promise for interesting future confections.
Yeah, as a cake, it's exciting. Yeah,
as a cake, perhaps, and then they'll rethink, but they'll learn
So
something
exciting.
along the way, and that's okay.
Yeah, that gives hope. Thank you for your comments. But still, I should notice that a data repository is also a site that should be maintained to keep staying online. So it has some important similarities in that respect. And maybe a small comment that we still need some enthusiastic people, probably younger people, who start long-term projects, because otherwise we wouldn't have them. Things like journals, for example, that may exist for decades or even centuries, are one of the probably positive examples of that it is actually possible. Some sustainability is still possible. I do think.
We need to better fund infrastructure. I mean, that's the case across the board. We have models and we have resources and people sort of, I think, roughly understand what it means to run a journal. And so those tend to fare better, at least, if they start up in the right circumstances. I mean, DH Commons had a journal too, and that also died. That sort of was a predecessor conceptually of reviews in DH. But I mean, we're terrible about funding infrastructure, other than through these like large EU grants. I mean, Daria still exists, but like, that has some similar problems to Bamboo, where no one really knows exactly what it is or what it's supposed to do for them, and like why it's getting all these EU grants. But concrete things. I mean, right now, what I'm angsting about this week is with Twitter melting down, the number of people who are bravely charging into the technical void to set up Mastodon servers for different communities, which I think is a great resource. Like, it's a wonderful thing to be able to have these places, but I worry that people don't necessarily know what they're getting into, and running a complex like social network platform is very different than setting up a WordPress site or some of the other things that like us older, DIY era, like DH people, would easily just like go set up over a night or a weekend. And so I worry that some of these efforts are going to end up failing, not because like it was too hard, but because we don't have good ways to like set up and run and maintain IT service kind of things within the community. And I think that's a problem.
So we depend very much on our general belief in sustainability.
It's a fantasy, but we it's one we really, really want to believe in.
Okay, so it's our belief in DH. Nadezhda, please, your question.
I'm happy to join the discussion. I think that the issue is that is in the scale of the infrastructure we try to build, and if it's sort of a global one. We do not feel that the reaction of the users is still intensive enough to proceed with it, and also funding and other stuff. But I think that the key thing is that the audience that use the infrastructure and the very particular tool, and if it's very local and it's very focused on something, it has more chances for a longer life. Also, I think that every tool has its own life cycle, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it have to die at some point, because it arrives to the web archive or somewhere and preserved for the future, for analysis, research as minimum. So I think that we have to think in terms of, not in terms of sustainability, but more in terms of audiences and scales of the projects. Because I feel so sorry when people produce something just for the period of a very particular project, and then it dies, but you want to use it and it's not active anymore. And it's such a crucial thing that you want to, but it's still impossible. It's even worse than it's not maintained.
Yeah, I mean, it's a struggle on all of the levels. Even with like, very, very local things that have communities of people, just like, I mean, life gets in the way. I mean, part of what killed Dirt was, having 2 and then 3 kids, and like I just don't have nights and weekends to spend on this thing anymore. Like it's a lot easier to build a thing if you're in a position where all of your free time is potentially at the disposal of these resources. And we've been struggling with the like what happens to a tool that lots of people use and love, but it's getting old problem right now at Stanford with Palladio, sort of a mapping network tool that many people like. You upload a CSV and you can visualize it in all kinds of ways. We've added some network metrics in the last couple of years, but that thing is going to need a rewrite from scratch, basically, because all of the components are at their end of life. And you know, Simon Wiles, my colleague and the ADHO infrastructure chair, has been very generous with his free time, you know, at doing little add-ons and things like that. But like, you know, is it realistic to ask him, who also has 2 young children, to like do this in his spare time without institutional support of some sort? I don't know where it goes from here. And I think this is a challenge that so many projects face, including now, you know, Voyant. Now that Stefan Sinclair has passed on, there is one developer on this planet who has the code base in his head. And while they're trying to raise funds to help continue to support him and bring more people onto the project, it's hard, and it's a struggle. And you know, the amount of work that it takes to set up foundations and get donations and deal with payroll and stuff, you know, is taking people away from what they'd rather be doing. And so it takes a great deal of dedication to be willing to say, like, yes, I will deal with incorporating as a nonprofit entity instead of doing my research, because I believe in this tool. And there aren't many people who will do that, like Jeffrey Rockwell's been trying to do.
Yeah, we just translated Voyant into Russian and testing if it's correct or not.
Yeah,
So
like
we can see
was
that these projects are very author dependent in DH, yeah, to some extent.
They're personal. I mean, like
Yeah.
these sorts of projects, especially these long-standing ones, you know, are as much as a manifestation of people as anything. I mean, especially with how few people work on individual tools. It's not like there's entire IT teams to kind of make it, you know, very generic, you know, like Microsoft Word or what have you. You know, Jeffrey Rockwell has talked about how like Stefan Sinclair's like personality is baked into Voyant, sort of the fun, playful visualizations. And there's some Easter eggs in there. You can actually find Stefan if you click in just the right place. A cloud pops down with Stefan in it. You know, this is from before he died. But yeah, I mean, transferring someone's personality to someone else to try to maintain it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, and one now it's just 2 people.
Yeah.
Anastasia.
Research has always been personal. Ideas, labs, people working in one direction, it's personal. And with digital humanities, we just see the process of them being personal, while previously they just died out without being noticed. It's wonderful.
Anastasia, it's your turn, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Queen, so much for your talk. And I just would like to continue Nadezhda's idea. I've been thinking that perhaps it will be very valuable if we could somehow compare and analyze how the users do use these directories, just in a way. Usually product managers analyze what is, I mean, what is really interesting, what is not. It would be a very, very valuable information in many aspects. For example, what are really what topics in a directory are really hot topics, yes, but also how is our community structured. But also maybe there are some technical decisions which are wrong. Maybe some interesting instruments which are not very obvious, and where they are somewhere there, and people do not know that they are somewhere hidden. So have you ever done something of this? Or maybe if not, is there an opportunity to make such a research? Because I mean, now we have a long story of many years of different directories and different decisions, and so we do have data to compare if there is this data. That's the first question.
Yeah, you know, I think this is another thing that I had, like, you know, sort of shoved into a dusty corner of my brain and forgotten about. But we did actually do some user testing for Dirt in one of its bamboo or post bamboo iterations. The thing that stuck with me out of that was that people really liked the categories on the first page, not the Tadira categories where we had to normalize it, but like I want to analyze a text, I want to visualize some data. Like people like that immediate connection to action. I like looking at this now retrospectively. I wonder if again that is, you know, we'll just keep going with this cake metaphor. I wonder if those were like basically just sprinkles on the cake, with no additional nutritional values really, but people liked them because like it felt like it made the directory make sense. But like, I mean, thinking about it really, yes, cake. I mean, thinking about it, how much sense do those categories make anyway? Like, I want to analyze a text. There's like at least 20 different ways of doing it there. And like, you know, they connect to very different research questions. And if these tool directories are especially for people who are new, you know, is that really a meaningful like bucket to give them anyways? You know, or is it better to like sort of have a set of illustrations of like, here concretely is a thing that was done with a specific kind of text to answer a certain kind of research question. Is this the kind of thing you want to do? But like just a listing of like tools that can on some level be used to analyze a text, be it, you know, AntConc or Voyant. I think, I mean, honestly, Excel might have been in there too. Like it was a real hodgepodge of things that I think felt better to users than it actually was for them. Yeah, I don't know. I think also realistically, like I don't really trust users at this point, where everyone says that they use these directories, and like yes, there was a fair amount of like page hits, but not for very long. It's not like people spent
this thing you can see. I mean, if you have if you do have data, I mean, for some
I don't know if I still have it.
Yes, that's the problem. So we can just talk theoretically that perhaps there is another way of thinking of different directories. It can be, well, I'm not even talking about usability and all this stuff, but I'm talking, it's like a kind of research instrument of what people are really use, what people are interested in. That can be funny.
Yeah. No, I think people say they use directories more than they actually do. They like the idea of them being there. Like it's like a, I mean, it's a cake. They're fun. They're it's exciting. There's all sorts of things. It's a world of possibilities, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mikhail. Your question. Please do check it. No, we don't have. I will ask a question in a while. I prefer not to sound eschatological, but probably it's irresistible. So it's something like a life cycle of a project. And what I see from your presentation, and I think it's the key idea, that it's important to look at the project not like the list, to make available, but is a point to create community and to find some kind of consensus. But probably we just need to understand that such life cycle as for the directories, as for other types of our projects. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny, the Bamboo article in Literary and Linguistic Computing, I was sad that I had to remove another favorite metaphor that was given to me by Brett Bobley from the National Endowment for the Humanities, where he pointed out that bamboo was like fertilizer. You know, it sort of laid a better groundwork for people to do other kinds of projects, and you know, made connections that weren't there before. And John Unsworth was the peer reviewer for the article. I ended up speaking with him about it as I was revising it, and there were no, you know, he was not okay with any like even vaguely eschatological references in literary and linguistic computing, so that had to go. But no, I mean, I actually think it's a great sort of recognition of the end of the project life cycle. It's fertilizer for more projects. And maybe some of those projects end up looking like the things that kind of lay the groundwork for them. Maybe someone was inspired by a tool that ended up no longer being supported, and instead they invent a new tool that does the same kind of thing but better, or maybe they go off in an entirely different direction, and that's okay too. But I mean, I think the whole landscape of digital humanities tools and projects is kind of a living, breathing, ever evolving thing, and individual projects will come and go, but I'm reminded by Stephen Ramsey in sort of an impromptu Zoom after Stefan died, reminding us all that ultimately the field is people. It's people doing this work and talking to one another and being in conversations, and those connections are kind of like what makes up the whole thing. I don't know.
And if we look at the question as if we are teachers in DH, what kind of resource we should propose for our students for their direction, or we should create a list by our own, each teacher, each new list?
I mean, I always just love seeing what students bring to me, and honestly, their ideas are often way cooler than what I come up with myself. I'll be teaching the third round of my non-English digital humanities class in January, which is a completely ridiculous class to prepare for. Everyone brings their own language that they can read, and then we do text analysis things to the extent possible with those languages, and like I can't read half of them. But I'm out there like sort of Googling for resources like across all however many languages there are. But I remember one of the best projects the last time I taught this class was a first-year student. It was she was starting college in fall 2020 from her parents' house, not even on campus, just back in her old bedroom, like at Stanford on Zoom. And what she brought was she wanted to analyze the Vietnamese subtitles on YouTube, on Chinese anime YouTube videos, which like I never would have come up with this in a million years. I didn't think it was possible because these were not like a layer of subtitles. They were subtitles like burned into the video. And my conclusion at first was like, this is impossible. There's no way. But it turned out that there was a Python library that could do it, and we did a really cool project with it. So I think, really like for students to bring something that they are passionate about and care about and like want to make happen, that opens up all kinds of possibilities that you might never even have thought of, and it's a lot of fun.
So it's better to be open, not a dictator as in Directory.
I'm walking
Mikhail?
chaos, so I yeah.
Let's try.
Is it better now?
Yeah, great.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, Quinn. It was very, very interesting and very deep presentation. Actually, I think that we all are facing kind of problem when our projects, big and small projects, they have life cycle, which eventually ends the project. And because I work with computer science students, students who are working with the code mostly, they all use GitHub. And probably you know that after Microsoft bought GitHub, they started using the data from all the projects, open source projects, proprietary projects that were placed on GitHub for training their artificial intelligence. And now they introduced Copilot, which is basically applying application of language model for analysis of the code. My idea is, I understand it's a little bit paranoid, but can you imagine that later, sometime when the digital humanities develop into more and more projects like yours, and smaller projects and bigger projects, community projects, we will have a kind of AI, artificial intelligence, that can analyze humans doing digital humanities. So basically, we will have kind of co-pilot that in the future maybe will help us make digital humanities more and more, I would say, not sustainable, but something that has longer life cycle, something that like Copilot helps to write code. So a kind of AI for digital humanities.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest and energy around AI right now, including especially in libraries. Stanford Libraries has like an AI working group, and there's all kinds of big ideas. I mean, like Copilot is interesting and it works, I think. I know a number of developers, including digital humanities developers, who swear by it. It makes their lives a lot easier, and they love using it and would even be willing to pay for it, which, for digital humanities people, being willing to pay for something like that's a big endorsement. I guess the question is, would anyone care enough and get enough data and sort of be thoughtful enough to develop something that would work with, like, not just sort of the code aspects of DH, but like all of the other hard questions that you need to ask. Also, like, imagining, like, do you have a prompt where like the person like types their research question, and then like, as they're doing their code, it's just like, wait a minute, like some of the like values you've put in here are going to give you weird answers because it looks like you're comparing, data sets of like two different sizes. Like, I mean, there's a lot of complexity that, like, sure, given enough data and a large enough grant and a big enough team, you might be able to train something to do that. I wonder if that's the most cost-effective or efficient way to do it, though. I mean, things like Programming Historian, for instance, or some of the the guides to sustainability, kind of get at some of those same questions as food for thought for people to consider in their own practice, without having to, like, deploy large data sets or like language models or things like that. It's kind of funny to think about what that might look like, sort of with something popping up being like, I'm not sure you want to choose that variable, but realistically, I mean, ultimately the digital humanities community is like tiny compared to like the number of people using like GitHub for data. Like the amount of data available to train such a thing is probably quite small if you consider kind of the norms of people doing this work. It seems like probably that will not be among the like AIs in the next 20 years, but I mean, I guess you never know if someone's committed enough to it.
Thank you.
So if we think about DH projects as mostly personal and individual, probably that is the aspect that we should keep in mind, because when we think about digital resources as general, so we prefer to think that we, like in hard sciences, have some general path to the knowledge. But practically, most authors and researchers prefer to find some own way, to the result. And probably that's the answer, that the general picture or general direction from the directory is not what DH researchers prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a place for showing good models and for people to learn from those models, and also showing bad models and for people to learn from those. One of my, here, I'll pull it up and share my screen again briefly. One of my current projects is called the Data Sitters Club, And this is where we take this beloved 80s and 90s series of girls' books about a group of girls who form a babysitting club, and analyze them in different ways with different tools, and kind of write up the entire process, you know, including our feelings and frustrations, and what works and what doesn't work along the way. And these are actually, this whole site is built in Jupyter Book, despite the you know, bright pink color palette. And so you can download the code for all of these different sections and reuse it. And you know, there's some tips and some warnings and things like that. You know, examples of how we've, you know, then taken the output and stuck them into different tools, like this is Site for doing you know, network visualizations and things like that. So I think, you know, while these books are on one level like extremely personal, you know, they're also things that other people can read about and experience and think about to what extent they want to you know, use these same tools or use these same models, or consider using something else, and sort of recognize the limitations of some of these methods. I think my very favorite, it's hard to pick a favorite, but one of my favorites is on sentiment analysis here. And there's like a whole Dostoevsky subplot of this book. And you know, our goal with this book explicitly is hopefully that like no one uses this method. But I think doing things like that and being transparent about, you know, the code and where it went and why we picked what we did, and like how frustrated we were when the whole thing blew up, are you know, kind of valuable things that we can share, that, you know, on one hand are personal, but on the other hand are transferable to other people and other projects.
Yeah, that's absolutely great project. Yeah. Please, some other questions to Quinn? Quinn, thank you so much. I would like to present you a cake, but Zoom does not have such a function. And I do understand now why you are so enthusiastic about your projects, because you think about them like cakes. I prefer to do so in the future as well. So thank you very much for your brilliant presentation and wonderful discussion. It was absolutely great. And do remember that Quinn's local time is 6:30 a.m. now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And this timing is perfect because the kids will be up any minute now, and chaos will ensue.
Yeah. So our best wishes to you and your family, and see you. Well, this recording will be on Zoom in close future. And thank you very much.